No, son, folks are not going to have an easy time of it this fall and winter. I reckon that 1860 will long be remembered as one of the worst years ever. We could stay here, Jed argued. I'll work the farm just like Pa did, and we'll take care of ourselves. The sheriff sighed, and just for a moment, a trace of a smile lingered on his thick lips. You're only 12 years old, son, and farming is a man's job, and I reckon it's a bit more than you can handle just yet. Then who's going to get Pa's farm? Sheriff Taggart sighed again. The mustache twitched from side to side. Your Pa doesn't rightly own the farm, son. He owes more on the property than it's worth, so I reckon it will just go back to the bank. Mr. Pearson spoke up for the first time. So what's this place like, Sheriff, this charity home place? Oh, it's right nice, the sheriff said quickly. But Jed saw his jaw tighten as he said the words. Woman by the name of Madeline Stryker runs it. The young'uns will feel right at home with her. Never saw an orphanage that was anything like a real home, the man muttered. Jed turned to him. Maybe we could live with you, sir, please? Mr. Pearson threw up his hands and sadly shook his head. It's like the sheriff says, lad. Times are hard. And another 2 mouths to feed. We can both work, Jed pleaded. We'll work real hard and... But the old man was shaking his head again. Can't do it, son, he said quietly, looking at the floor. Just can't do it. He turned to Sheriff Taggart. Can't the orphanage wait? Can't the young'uns at least stay here until after the burying? Charity Home has 2 openings right now, the lawman replied. One for a boy and one for a girl. If we wait 2 days, one or both of those spots could be filled, and then where would we be? No, sir. We have to go today. He turned to Jed and Mandy. Get your things together, kids. I've got a buggy waiting in the yard. Mandy began to cry. Panic seized Jed. I can take Wolf, can't I? But the big sheriff shook his head. Sorry, boy. It's against orphanage rules. He's my dog, Jed exploded. Pa gave him to me. I have to take him. I have to. You cannot make me leave him here. A big hand gripped his shoulder. Now listen, boy, and listen good. I already told you the orphanage will not take your dog. Rad Baylor is coming by this morning to pick him up. I already promised the dog to him. Rad Baylor? Jed was horrified. Rad Baylor was a drunkless, shiftless drunk. There was no telling what cruelty he would show Wolf. Sir, he pleaded, Wolf is my dog. Pa gave him to me. He's all I have to remind me of Pa. Please, sir. Sheriff Taggart was growing red in the face. Son, don't make me take my belt off. As Jed rose to his feet, an indescribable feeling of helplessness swept over him like a cold wind. An orphanage. Mr. Pearson's reaction to the word had been enough to tell him that this was a place to be dreaded. He shivered, and Wolf, his dog, would be left in the hands of Rad Baylor. Suddenly he felt very small and very vulnerable, as if he were a tiny child venturing out for the very first time into the woods at night. The comfortable world that he and Mandy had known, the safe, peaceful world with Ma and Pa, had just been shattered into a million pieces, and he knew that no one could ever put those pieces together again. Chapter 2, The Orphanage. That's the place, young'uns, Sheriff Taggart said soberly as he pulled back on the reins and stopped the carriage at the curb. The Charity Home for Children. Jed and Mandy stared in silence. A large, forbidding 2-story building of dark red brick sat some distance from the street, surrounded by tall, stately oaks. 4 enormous white pillars graced the entrance, standing tall and proud, like sentinels guarding the massive double doors. But the property, which was once elegant, now showed signs of neglect. The vast front yard of the orphanage was overgrown with weeds, and the walk leading from the street to the front porch was cracked and crumbling. At that moment, Jed felt a variety of overwhelming emotions. Indescribable sorrow at the loss of his ma and pa, helplessness at his own ability or inability to do anything to take care of Mandy, anger at God for taking his parents so quickly, frustration and loneliness at having Wolf snatched from him, and now, staring up at the ominous building that was to be their home, an overwhelming sense of dread. Mandy broke the silence. "It looks like a dungeon." "You've never seen a dungeon?" Jed was cross. But Mandy was right. The charity home for children did make one think of a dungeon. But his sister's remark didn't help his own fears, not even one bit, and he swallowed hard. "Well, this is exactly what I think a dungeon would look like," Mandy retorted. Bending over, she picked up the flour sack at her feet. Sheriff Taggart coughed nervously. "Well, this is your new home, and I know you'll like it. Let's go meet Miss Madeline, shall we?" Clutching the flour sacks containing their meager possessions, Jed and Mandy silently followed the lawman up the front walkway. As they approached the building, they could see that many of the flagstones of the porch were broken. In fact, some were missing altogether. The steps leading up to the porch, they were all chipped, and they were crumbling. Whitewash peeled from the pillars. Countless little white flakes littered the steps, and the porch, it looked like the scattering of snow. Up near the eaves, ugly green stains marred the walls, and the enormous building, which was once elegant and proud, was now an unsightly picture of neglect and decay. Sheriff Taggart cleared his throat. "Well, let's go in, shall we?" Stroking his huge mustache, he turned and attempted a reassuring smile. "You'll like it here, young'uns, I promise." The words were empty and hollow. Mandy clutched Jed's hand. Although she and Jed often fought like brothers and sisters do, he had always been there for her whenever she had a real problem, and he could be so kind and gentle when she really needed him. And this was one of those times. "Jed," she whispered, "I'm afraid." He squeezed her hand. "So am I," he whispered. Their sheriff led them through the front door and turned right into a wide hallway. Portraits of stern-faced men hung on the wall to the right and through an open door on the left. Jed and Mandy caught a glimpse of a large room filled with tables and chairs. The sheriff tugged at Jed's elbow. "This way." Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor. The interior of the building showed the same neglect and decay as the outside. The floor was dirty and dull. The painted woodwork was chipped and scratched. The walls were drab, and plaster was just peeling away in some places. Up high, near the water-stained ceiling, cobwebs adorned the walls. Jed shuddered. This place was so cold, so dreary, and so very depressing. Mandy squeezed his hand even tighter.